Marcus Chen pushed his mashed potatoes around his plate as his father launched into his annual retirement lecture. It was the same speech every Thanksgiving, the one that made him feel like a complete financial failure at age 32. "When I was your age, I already owned a house and had $50,000 saved," his dad proclaimed, gesturing with his fork for emphasis. "You just need to stop eating out so much and buy a house like we did. Get a 30-year mortgage, pay it off early, and you'll be set for retirement." Marcus nodded politely, the way he'd learned to do over the years, but inside his stomach churned with a familiar mixture of guilt and frustration, because he'd tried following his advice. For 5 years, he'd tried, and it had nearly destroyed him financially. What his father didn't understand, what an entire generation of well-meaning parents doesn't understand, is that the financial playbook that worked brilliantly in 1985 is not just outdated in 2025, it's financially toxic. The rules changed, the game changed, but nobody told the coaches. Marcus's father bought his first house in 1987 for $89,000. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a decent neighborhood. His salary as a middle manager was $35,000 annually. Do the math. He paid 2.5 times his annual income for a house that would comfortably shelter a family for decades. That same house sold last month for $485,000. Marcus makes $75,000 as a marketing coordinator, more than double his father's inflation-adjusted salary from 1987. But that house now costs 6.5 times his annual income. The financial relationship between income and housing cost hasn't just changed, it's been completely shattered. But when Marcus tried to explain this to his parents, his mother waved his hand dismissively. "Houses have always been expensive, honey. We just made sacrifices. We didn't eat out 3 times a week like your generation does." Here's what Marcus's mother didn't mention. In 1987, they spent 18% of their income on their mortgage. Today, that same payment would consume 41% of Marcus's income, before taxes, insurance, maintenance, or any of the other costs that come with home ownership. The sacrifice Marcus's parents made was eating out less. The sacrifice Marcus would need to make is eating, period. But the housing crisis is just the beginning of why parental retirement advice has become a roadmap to financial disaster. The bigger issue is that Marcus's parents lived through the last era of guaranteed retirement security, and they don't even realize it's gone. Marcus's father worked for the same manufacturing company for 37 years. He didn't stress about 401k contribution limits or expense ratios or asset allocation. He showed up, did his job, and knew that every year of service earned him a larger slice of guaranteed retirement income for life. His pension pays him $3,200 monthly. That's $38,400 per year, indexed for inflation, guaranteed until he dies. He didn't pick it, he didn't manage it, he didn't lose sleep over market crashes. It just exists, as reliable as gravity. Marcus works for a tech startup. There's no pension, there never was, there never will be. Instead, he has a 401k that his company matches up to 3% if he's lucky. The rest is on the investment choices, the market risk, the sequence of returns risk, the inflation risk, the longevity risk. All of it. His father's retirement planning consisted of working at the same place for decades and trusting the system. Marcus's retirement planning requires his to become a part-time financial advisor while working full-time at his actual job. When his father suggests he just save 10% like we did, he's comparing his supplementary savings to his primary retirement strategy. It's like comparing a side salad to the entire meal. Now let's talk about the most dangerous piece of parental retirement advice, the obsession with paying off your mortgage early. "A paid-off house is the foundation of financial security," Marcus's father told his. "Pay extra principal every month. Get that monkey off your back." This advice was brilliant in 1987. Marcus's parents had a 10.5% mortgage rate. Every extra dollar they put toward principal was a guaranteed 10.5% return. In a world where savings accounts paid 5% and stock market returns weren't guaranteed, paying off a 10.5% mortgage early was genuinely smart money. But Marcus's mortgage rate is 3.2%. Every dollar he puts toward extra principal earns his a guaranteed 3.2% return. Meanwhile, a boring index fund has averaged 10% annually for the past century. Let's do the math that Marcus's parents never had to do. If Marcus puts an extra $500 monthly toward his mortgage principal for 30 years, he'll save about $187,000 in interest payments. Sounds great, right? But if he invests that same $500 monthly in a diversified portfolio earning 7% annually, he'll have $566,000 after 30 years. His parents' advice would cost his $379,000 in opportunity cost, nearly $400,000. That's not just bad advice, that's generationally devastating advice. But wait, there's more. Marcus's parents are absolutely convinced that keeping large amounts of cash is prudent financial planning. You need 6 months of expenses and savings, his mother insists, and we keep extra cash because you never know what might happen. Marcus's parents currently have $47,000 sitting in savings accounts earning 0.5% annual interest. They're proud of this emergency fund. It makes them feel secure and responsible. Here's what they don't understand. Inflation is running at 6.2% annually. Their safe cash is losing 5.7% of its purchasing power every single year. In 10 years, their $47,000 will buy what $26,000 buys today. They think they're being conservative. They're actually gambling, betting that nothing they want to buy will increase in price faster than 0.5% annually. It's a bet they're guaranteed to lose. Marcus tried to explain this to them. Maybe you could put some of that money in I-bonds or index funds, he suggested gently. His father's response was immediate and dismissive. The stock market is gambling. We don't gamble with our money. Meanwhile, their savings account is a casino where the house edge is 5.7% annually and the game never stops.
The generational divide gets even more pronounced when it comes to credit cards. Marcus's parents treat credit cards like financial leprosy, dangerous tools that only irresponsible people use. If you can't afford to pay cash for it, you can't afford it, his father declared during one particularly intense financial discussion. Credit cards are for emergencies only. This advice made perfect sense in 1987 when credit cards had annual fees, terrible rewards programs, and interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. Using credit was expensive and risky. But Marcus has credit cards with no annual fees that give his 2% cash back on everything and 5% back on rotating categories. He pays them off monthly and has never paid a penny in interest. Last year, his credit card rewards paid for his entire vacation to Portugal. More importantly, Marcus understands that credit utilization affects his credit score, which affects his insurance rates, his ability to refinance his mortgage, and sometimes even his employment prospects. Strategic credit card use isn't just free money, it's a requirement for optimal financial health in 2025. His parents see his credit card rewards and assume he's living beyond his means. They don't understand that he's turned the credit card company's marketing budgets into his personal income stream. Perhaps the most damaging piece of parental retirement advice is the absolute terror of stock market investing that Marcus's parents carry like a virus. "We lost $30,000 in the 2008 crash," his mother says whenever investing comes up. "We're not doing that again." What his mother doesn't mention is that they panic sold everything in March 2009 at the absolute bottom of the market. If they'd held those investments, they would have recovered their losses by 2012 and been sitting on massive gains by now. But they learned exactly the wrong lesson from 2008. Instead of learning about diversification, time horizons, and the importance of not panic selling, they learned that the stock market is dangerous and unpredictable. So they've kept everything in cash and bonds for the past 15 years, earning essentially nothing while inflation steadily eroded their purchasing power. Marcus, meanwhile, invested consistently through the 2020 market crash, the 2022 correction, and every other market hiccup. His portfolio has grown from $12,000 to $127,000 in 8 years, not because he's a brilliant investor, but because he didn't panic. His parents look at his investment gains and assume he's taking dangerous risks. They don't understand that not investing is the most dangerous risk of all.
The generational advice gap reaches peak absurdity when it comes to student loans. Marcus's parents paid for their college educations with summer jobs and graduated debt-free. This is a genuine accomplishment that Marcus respects and admires. But when Marcus graduated with $47,000 in student loans, his father's advice was simple: pay those off as fast as possible. Debt is slavery. Marcus's student loans have an average interest rate of 3.8%. Following his father's advice, he was putting $1,200 monthly towards student loan payments while contributing nothing to his 401k and nothing to his emergency fund. He was prioritizing 3.8% guaranteed savings over capturing his employer's 401k match, a 50% instant return, and overbuilding any financial security. It took a financial advisor to explain that he was following the exact opposite of optimal strategy. He should contribute enough to get his full employer match first, build a small emergency fund second, and only then focus on extra student loan payments. His father's advice wasn't just wrong, it was costing him thousands in free employer match money every year while leaving him vulnerable to any financial emergency.
Marcus's parents are also deeply suspicious of the modern economy that Marcus navigates daily. When Marcus started freelance consulting on weekends to accelerate his savings, his mother worried he was spreading herself too thin. "You have a good job," his father said. "Focus on that. Don't get distracted by get-rich-quick schemes." Marcus's weekend consulting brings in an extra $18,000 annually, money he uses to maximize his 401k contributions and build his investment portfolio. In his parents' generation, this would have been called working a second job and would have been completely normal. But because Marcus does it from his laptop instead of at a physical location, and because he found clients through networking instead of newspaper ads, his parents view it as somehow less legitimate. They don't understand that the gig economy isn't about getting rich quick. It's about adapting to an economy where traditional employment no longer provides the financial security it once did.
The generational advice gap extends to the tools and platforms that Marcus uses to manage his finances. He uses budgeting apps, investment platforms, credit monitoring services, and automated savings tools that his parents view with deep suspicion. "You're giving all your financial information to strangers on the internet," his mother warned when Marcus mentioned using Mint to track his expenses. Marcus's parents still balance their checkbook by hand and pay bills with physical checks mailed through the postal service. They think Marcus's digital financial management is risky and impersonal. Meanwhile, Marcus's automated systems ensure he never misses a payment, always captures maximum rewards, and continuously optimizes his financial strategy without requiring constant manual intervention. His parents think they're being careful, Marcus thinks they're being inefficient, and the gap between their approaches continues to widen every year. The most painful example of outdated parental advice involves real estate investing. Marcus's parents bought their house as a place to live, watched it appreciate over 30 years, and now consider themselves real estate experts. "You should buy a rental property," his father suggested. "Real estate always goes up in value. It's the safest investment there is." Marcus's parents remember when you could buy a decent rental property for $40,000, rent it for $500 monthly, and generate positive cash flow from day one. Property management was simple because renters stayed for years and maintenance costs were predictable. But in Marcus's market, that same rental property costs $180,000, rents for $1,200 monthly, and generates negative cash flow every month after taxes, insurance, maintenance, and vacancy allowances. His parents can't understand why Marcus doesn't jump at this opportunity. They think he's being overly cautious. They don't realize that the real estate math that worked in their era simply doesn't work anymore in most markets. Here's the cruelest irony. Marcus's parents' financial advice isn't bad because they're stupid or malicious. It's bad because they succeeded with strategies that no longer work. They bought houses when houses were affordable. They had pensions when pensions existed. They saved cash when inflation was low and interest rates were high. They avoided debt when debt was expensive and credit was hard to get. Every piece of advice they give Marcus worked perfectly for them. That's exactly why it's so dangerous for his. Marcus's father paid off his 10.5% mortgage early and saved a fortune. Marcus would lose a fortune following this same strategy with his 3.2% mortgage. Marcus's mother kept cash when savings accounts paid 8% and inflation was 3%. Marcus loses money keeping cash when savings accounts pay 0.5% and inflation is 6%. The strategies that made Marcus's parents financially successful are not just outdated, they're actively harmful in today's financial environment.
The saddest part isn't just that Marcus's parents give his bad advice. It's that they can't understand why their advice doesn't work, which means they can't learn or adapt. When Marcus tries to explain opportunity cost, compound interest, or inflation-adjusted returns, his parents' eyes glaze over, not because they are unintelligent, but because these concepts weren't relevant to their financial success. They didn't need to understand expense ratios because they had pensions. They didn't need to calculate opportunity cost because their mortgage rates were higher than investment returns. They didn't need to worry about inflation because their wages increased with inflation automatically. Marcus's financial planning requires skills and knowledge that his parents never needed to develop. When he tries to share what he's learning, it sounds like he's speaking a foreign language. The generational advice problem gets worse when parents use guilt to enforce their outdated strategies. Marcus's mother frequently says things like, "We sacrificed so you could have opportunities we never had." This is true, and Marcus appreciates it deeply, but it comes with an unspoken expectation that Marcus should use those opportunities to follow the exact same path his parents took. When Marcus explains why he's not buying a house immediately, his mother hears excuses. When Marcus describes his investment strategy, his father hears recklessness. When Marcus talks about maximizing credit card rewards, his parents hear irresponsibility. Marcus feels like he's being ungrateful for the sacrifices his parents made by not following their advice, but following their advice would waste the opportunities those sacrifices created. Perhaps the most dangerous aspect of parental financial advice is the complete misunderstanding of inflation's impact over time. Marcus's parents think in nominal dollars, the actual numbers they see, rather than real dollars adjusted for purchasing power. "We bought our first car for $3,200, his father often says. Cars today are ridiculously expensive. That $3,200 in 1987 equals $8,600 in today's money. A basic new car today costs about $25,000. So yes, cars have gotten more expensive in real terms, but not nearly as much as his father thinks. This inflation blindness affects every piece of financial advice Marcus receives. His parents compared today's prices to historical prices without adjusting for inflation, making everything seem impossibly expensive and Marcus's generation seem financially irresponsible. The most fundamental shift between Marcus's parents' financial world and Marcus's financial world is the complete reversal of what constitutes risk. For Marcus's parents, cash was safe and stocks were risky. Staying at one job was safe and changing jobs was risky. Paying off debt was safe and carrying debt was risky. For Marcus, cash guarantees losses to inflation. Stocks are necessary for long-term wealth building. Staying at one job limits income growth. Strategic debt use can accelerate wealth building. Everything Marcus's parents learned about financial risk is not just wrong for his generation, it's exactly backwards. Marcus's parents also fundamentally misunderstand Social Security's role in Marcus's retirement planning. They view Social Security as a nice supplement to their pensions and savings. Marcus's parents' Social Security replaces about 30% of their pre-retirement income. But Marcus will have no pension. His Social Security, if it still exists at current levels when he retires, might replace 25% of his pre-retirement income. And that's if he's lucky and Congress doesn't reduce benefits to address the looming trust fund crisis. Marcus's parents had three sources of retirement income: pensions, savings, and Social Security. Marcus has one: savings. Everything else is either gone or uncertain. When Marcus's father says Social Security will help, he's thinking about his Social Security experience. He's not thinking about the fundamentally different role Social Security will play in Marcus's retirement. Here's what makes this situation particularly tragic. Marcus's parents aren't just giving bad advice. They're giving advice that would have been brilliant for their generation and is devastating for Marcus's. Marcus's parents succeeded by buying affordable houses with high-interest mortgages, working stable jobs with guaranteed pensions, saving cash when interest rates were high and inflation was low, avoiding debt when credit was expensive and hard to get, staying conservative because they had guaranteed retirement income. Marcus needs to succeed by strategically managing expensive housing with low interest debt, building his own retirement security without pensions, investing aggressively because cash loses to inflation, using debt strategically when credit is cheap and accessible, and taking calculated risks because he has no guaranteed income. The strategies are not just different, they're opposite. So, what can Marcus and millions of other adults caught between generational financial wisdom actually do? First, he needs to understand that his parents' advice isn't malicious, it's experiential. They're sharing strategies that worked perfectly for them. The problem isn't their intentions, it's the changed context. Second, Marcus needs to stop trying to convince his parents that their advice is wrong. Instead, he needs to acknowledge that their advice was right for their situation while explaining why his situation is different. Dad, paying off your 10.5% mortgage early was brilliant, Marcus might say, but my mortgage is 3.2%, so the math is different now. Third, Marcus needs to educate himself independently. He can't rely on parental wisdom that doesn't apply to his financial reality. He needs to understand modern financial strategies, tools, and opportunities. Here's what Marcus's generation actually needs to know about building wealth in today's economy. Housing strategy. Don't rush to buy. Rent can be financially superior in expensive markets. When you do buy, focus on payment affordability, not purchase price. Use low interest rates strategically rather than paying off debt early. Investment philosophy. Start investing immediately, even with small amounts. Use tax-advantaged accounts to their maximum potential. Embrace index fund investing for broad diversification. And don't panic during market downturns. Debt management. Distinguish between good debt, low interest rates that enable wealth building, and bad debt, high interest rates on consumption. Use credit strategically for rewards and credit building. Career development. Develop portable skills rather than company loyalty. Negotiate salary increases regularly. Consider side income streams to accelerate savings. And technology integration. Use apps and platforms to automate financial management. Embrace digital tools for budgeting, investing, and optimization. The uncomfortable truth is that Marcus's generation faces financial challenges that their parents never had to navigate. College costs have increased faster than inflation. Housing costs have increased faster than wages. Healthcare costs have exploded. Pension systems have collapsed. At the same time, Marcus's generation has opportunities their parents never had. Technology makes investing cheaper and more accessible. Information is abundant and mostly free. Side income opportunities are everywhere. Financial tools are more sophisticated and user-friendly. Marcus needs to acknowledge both realities. The challenges are real and unprecedented, but the opportunities are also real and unprecedented. Back at the Thanksgiving dinner table, Marcus takes a deep breath and tries a different approach with his parents. Dad, I really appreciate everything you and Mom did to give me opportunities, he says. The house you bought and paid off early was a brilliant strategy when mortgage rates were 10.5%. I'm using the same principles, maximizing returns and minimizing costs, but the numbers are different now. He pulls out his phone and shows him a simple calculation. My mortgage rate is 3.2%, so paying it off early gives me a 3.2% return. But investing that money gives me about 10% annually on average. I'm following your strategy of choosing the higher return. His father pauses, considering this. For the first time in years, Marcus sees genuine curiosity in his expression rather than immediate dismissal. I never thought of it that way, he admits. It's not a complete breakthrough, Marcus's parents will probably continue giving advice based on their experience, but it's a start, the beginning of a conversation rather than the end of one. Marcus's story illustrates the choice facing millions of adults today. Follow well-meaning but outdated parental advice or take responsibility for learning modern financial strategies. It's not an easy choice. Following parental advice feels respectful and safe. Learning independent financial strategies feels risky and ungrateful. But Marcus's financial future doesn't depend on his parents' feelings about his strategies. It depends on whether those strategies work in today's economic reality. Marcus can honor his parents' sacrifices and good intentions while still adapting their wisdom to modern circumstances. He can appreciate the foundation they built while building his own structure on top of it. The most important lesson from Marcus's story isn't that parental financial advice is always wrong. It's that financial strategies must adapt to changing circumstances. Marcus's parents' advice worked because it matched their economic environment. Marcus needs strategies that match his economic environment. The principles remain the same. Spend less than you earn, invest for the long term, minimize unnecessary risks, and maximize opportunities. But the specific tactics for implementing these principles change with interest rates, inflation rates, housing costs, investment options, and employment structures. Marcus's parents succeeded by mastering the financial game of their era. Marcus will succeed by mastering the financial game of his era. The rules changed, the game changed. Marcus needs to learn a new game instead of trying to win with strategies designed for a game that no longer exists. That's not disrespectful to his parents. It's the natural evolution of financial wisdom from one generation to the next. And it's the only way Marcus will build the financial security that his parents worked so hard to make possible for his.